Okay, folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier. Just saw The Iron Claw. I'm leaving the movie theater. And so, should you see it? Should you not? Well, I think if you're a pro wrestling fan of any age, yeah, you should. I think it's a must watch for wrestling fans. I do think it's a great movie. I do think it's not a perfect movie, but I'll get into that. I don't know if I'd give it the title of greatest pro wrestling movie of all time. I think that's still reserved for the wrestler Mickey Rourke. However, this might be a strong number 2, and the rankings could change at any time. So let's discuss. First off, I tried to stay away from a lot of pre-movie information. I saw YouTube videos comparing, or just the thumbnails comparing the actors to the actual wrestlers. I saw, spoiler by the way, I saw somebody posted something, or I did a Google search on the movie, and the thing came up. Why isn't Chris Von Erich in the Iron Claw? So I kind of had that little spoiler. I didn't follow up on that until I saw the movie, but I had that in my head going into this movie. Why isn't Chris Von Erich in the Iron Claw? Now, I didn't know if that was a fact or just some type of goofy Google thing that I got. It turned out to be accurate. In the film, The Iron Claw, the youngest brother, I guess he was the youngest brother overall, Chris Von Erich, who did wrestle, but not a whole lot. And he was at least once, on the cover of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, but he was younger than Mike by a couple of years, and he was smaller than all of them, Chris Von Erich. And I think this was like in the late 80s, early 90s. It was before the cruiserweights really was a big thing, unfortunately for Chris, because if he had come along, even 6 or 7 or 8 years later, he might have done just fine as a cruiserweight, because he did put the work into the exercise and so forth, and he seemed like he had the desire to be a wrestler like his brothers, but he didn't have the size. So sad story short, after Mike Von Erich committed suicide, which I think was in 87 or 88, Chris committed suicide, I want to say in 89 or 90, maybe 91, and Kerry was the final suicide in February of 93. Interestingly enough, just like a week before or after Andre the Giant died. I know that Kerry and Andre died within a week or two of each other. Unbelievable that Andre, just as a side note, was like 45 years old when he passed away. So about this movie, I guess I'll give the negative first. And there's not a whole lot of negative, but there is some. I feel that if you are a non-wrestling fan, or even if you're a pro wrestling fan that's not entirely familiar with this legend, the story of the Von Erichs, the tragedy, the triumphs, you might get a little bit lost. And I think it was, as a filmmaker myself, not on the level of finances of these guys who made this thing, A24. Maxwell Jacob Friedman, by the way, is executive producer. Good job, Max. But one of the executive producers. I think, spoilers, the time lapse of basically Kerry Von Erich winning the World Heavyweight title, the NWA World Heavyweight title. Then he's looking at the belt at the house. He says to Kevin, I think I'm going to go for a ride or something. We kind of cut to, him on his motorcycle going for a ride. Then the next thing you know, he's waking up in the morning, and he's got a big scar on his shoulder, and he's getting a pair of crutches, and he hobbles to the kitchen, and we see that he's missing a foot. And basically, they abridged from May of 84 to October of 86, which is 2.5 years. And you don't see the fact that Kerry, didn't hold the world title for very long because the promoters really didn't trust him. You don't see that they actually in that span of time. Somewhere in there, in '86, World Class Championship Wrestling seceded from the NWA. Yes, I know that's wrestling, but it's still a prominent thing. You don't see the complications that led to Kerry's foot being amputated, the fact that he had this motorcycle accident. Still, people don't have the story straight, exactly what happened. I wasn't there, but did he lose the foot the night of the accident? Most stories seem to think not. They think that there was complications because Kerry either walked on a bad foot in the actual hospital, or he had that one-off match with Brian Adidas at the Sportatorium when he was far too early to come back, and he re-aggravated the foot, and then they had to amputate after he had that one kind of, half comeback match. So, point is, I could have enjoyed hearing the truth for a fucking change on the whole Kerry's foot ordeal. I think this movie could have at least tried to set the record straight. But maybe the facts are so convoluted that even Kevin, who seems to be involved in this production, doesn't know the facts of his own brother's foot. I don't know. So that I didn't like. And I will say this. I do feel very mixed about the Chris Von Erich exemption. I do feel like that was kind of an avoidable creative decision. I understand fully why they did it. It's just because the story is so goddamn big that, I think they could have done something kind of nice and maybe merged the Michael and Chris and just called them like Michael Chris. If you had to get rid of the character, which I don't think you had to, I think it would have been a nice tribute to just kind of squeeze him in there as a middle name for the Michael character. If you're really going to say that this is a fictionalized version of a true story, then what the hell difference does it make if you merge Mike and Chris in some type of fashion? But if it were me, which it was not, I think I could have shoehorned Chris into this movie, and he wouldn't just be a redundant younger brother character. I think I would have made him like the fan. Like, he is the fan of the family, and he kind of, the way that I would have done the Chris Von Erich character, he's a bit younger and smaller than everybody else, so he kind of represents the fan base of the wrestling fans in Texas especially, but just in general, the wrestling fans. That's what I would have done with the Chris character. And once he sees, his older brothers David and Mike go down, the Chris character would have been like a metaphoric fan who loses interest and loses hope in the Von Erichs and dies himself. And then when the fans leave, when Chris leaves, and then Kerry, the champion, leaves. I guess we'll get into the casting. Look, this movie had a lot of things, a lot of creative challenges, and money, you just can't fix everything. I think the gentleman's name is Jeremy Allen White, if I've gotten that. I don't know if I've seen him before or not. But basically, the guy that played Kerry, I think that's a colossal challenge to play Kerry Von Erich. Also, are you going to get an awesome actor who also has the physique of Kerry Von Erich, who was about 260 pounds of solid muscle at his prime? I think that's a tough challenge. This gentleman might have been 190 pounds, maybe 200, maybe not even. He could have been 180 pounds. Looked like he's probably 5'8", 5'9" in real life. Kerry, I think, was they think they billed him as 6'2" or 6'4". Kerry was a big jock, and this gentleman is a great actor, and I would definitely see him in another movie. I feel like it's just a tough thing because, once again, you're casting, you have the people like assholes like myself are going to hold this thing to some pretty high standards. Where do you find a guy who looks like Kerry Von Erich that can also act? I do think that, I believe his name is Jeremy, had a wonderful face. His face had the sad eyes of Kerry Von Erich, so I have nothing against this gentleman's acting. Zac Efron, applause. I think Zac Efron, who seemed just to tint his hair a little bit browner as opposed to the black hair, and he got jacked up for this thing. Most people, when they saw pictures of Zac Efron for this movie, they thought he was playing Kerry. He was so big. But he was playing the central character of Kevin. And this is what our creative challenge comes. I guess to the winner goes the spoils, if you want to see it like that. But I mean, Kevin, he who lives tells the story, right? History is written by the winners, or in this case, the survivor. And the story, the central character, which to wrestling fans might be a surprise, is Kevin Von Erich, not Kerry, nobody else. Kevin is the central character, and we see basically everything from his perspective. Notably, when David passes away, we don't go over to Japan with David. We don't see Bruiser Brody and David in the hotel. We don't see Brody throwing the pills in the toilet. We just see basically Kevin coming to see his dad. His dad's very morose at the kitchen table. What's wrong, Dad? David died. What? So yeah, I did a fucking millennial fuck. Wait, what? So basically, we're seeing everything from Kevin's perspective, how he lived this thing, okay? So that being said, I do feel like the movie did quite well, and to be honest, I can see where the cost for many of these things. For instance, I thought we would have going to see a Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair. I believe it was May 4th, Texas Stadium match. We really didn't see it. We just saw Kerry going to the ring, and we see Doris watching at home, watching the television, very artsy, A24 here, with the ghost, I believe, of David watching from the staircase. Now, guess what, folks? I don't believe that match was shown live on television as it happened, even in Texas. So that's, once again, creative license. Okay, we get it. And I believe Doris was actually in attendance at that show because I think there was photographs of her celebrating with Fritz and Kerry and Kevin and Mike and so forth. The Lance Von Erich thing, I know Meltzer was all warm in the panties about MJF playing Lance Von Erich. They really didn't go there unless you were a wrestling fan, that happened to know that MJF was cast as Lance Von Erich. I took a bathroom break around that time, but you see Lance Von Erich, MJF wrestling, and Kevin standing on the apron waiting for the hot tag that never comes. I think they just probably had a lot of deleted scenes, so if there's ever a Blu-ray or a DVD or streaming of this thing with DVD extras, there might be some Lance Von Erich footage that was left on the cutting room floor, because we really I don't think we even hear the name Lance Von Erich. Also, as far as the actual wrestling stuff, the Fabulous Freebirds are introduced, but they're kind of skirted over. The importance of that feud, yes, I know that's just wrestling, but that importance of the heel Freebirds making the Von Erichs, I think it's a little bit skirted over. Honestly, folks, I think if I were to have made this movie or had been a contributor, which I was not, I think it would have had another hour's worth of material. And I think the risk with that is then the happy asshole wrestling fans like us would be more happier assholes. But I don't know if the general audience could have handled it. And I don't think this movie was made for wrestling fans per se. I think it was more aiming for the mainstream fan, but I think this is where this movie might have a marketing issue, or even if it's looking for Oscars, which I feel that it is, because it's released for Christmas week. The biggest quandary this movie has, and I'm not saying a wrestling movie, but this movie has this quandary. Unless you're a pro wrestling fan, you're going to be missing some stuff, because you're not going to know what the fuck's going on with Kerry's foot. That's a big one. I don't think most people are going to catch on, unless they're familiar with the Von Erich story, that when he goes out for the motorcycle ride, that he has an accident, he loses his foot, and it's kind of up in the air whether it's kind of Fritz's fault or not. And we're just missing some stuff. We're missing some key scenes, I think. I think there's too, and I don't know if it's a financial issue, if just shooting a very complicated missing foot fucking motorcycle accident, if that was just too expensive. But I do feel like we could have spent 10 minutes registering that. I feel like we kind of missed out. If they filmed it and didn't put in the movie, or in this version of it at least, I think that's kind of a shame. I think some people, you might lose some fucking people, I'm just telling you. And I think for the hardcore wrestling fan like myself, they're going to say, you shoulda, you shoulda, you shoulda, you shoulda. You're never going to hear the fucking end of it. That all being said, it's an awesome movie. It really is. And I give credit to Zac Efron. I'm not against Zac Efron. I have no hashtag for Zac Efron either way. But I definitely feel that this is the best fucking Zac Efron acting or movie I've seen. So applause, Zac. I think as far as like oh my God, the Ric Flair thing, mixed feelings. I think the guy who played Ric Flair did his absolute best. I think he had fun with it. I just feel that the Flair character, he's kind of taking stuff from like the 82 Flair with the fucking sport coat, into the 85, 86 Flair, and then like kind of the 98 Flair, where he's like taking off, he's taking off his shoe. It was kind of all over the place, and the guy had a really kind of bizarro Flair look. I think that's a tough role to fill once again. I thought the guy did, I don't think he did bad. I just think I would have loved to have seen if they had auditioned other guys to play Flair. I don't know. Don't ask me who I would have cast instead. I would have, to be honest, I was hoping that my buddy there, Pillman Jr., would have applied for this thing on time, because I think he could have pulled off Flair, or somebody. Giff Garrison might have done a fucking good Flair. I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe MJF. I don't see why the fuck. Maybe they should have cast MJF as Flair. That might have been good. This guy looked more like an actor than a wrestler, but I thought he was all right. Interestingly, an NWA guy, Silas, I think is his name, did a pretty inspired Buddy Jack Roberts. Terry Bam Bam Gordy. I've seen that guy wrestle. He did a really nice Terry Gordy. And I think if you're looking for emulation of actual wrestlers, the standout to me is the guy that played Harley Race. I don't know if that guy's like an independent wrestler or an actor or a combination, but the gentleman who played Harley Race, I thought was fantastic. I think I sent my buddy there, Anderson, not Arn Anderson, but a wrestler named Anderson. I think I sent him the information. I thought he might play a good Harley. But this guy who played Harley he had a great face for Harley Race. I don't know if he got that fucking tattoo, like that military tattoo that Harley Race had. But in any event, the guy that played Harley Race, as far as maximizing your minutes with just 10 minutes of airtime, I thought that Kevin Von Erich Harley Race match was pretty good. I did recognize Chavo Guerrero playing the Sheik, interestingly enough, or Chavo Guerrero Jr. I did pick up that he was trying to be the Sheik. And I don't know if Sheik, the original Detroit Sheik, was actually in Texas in 1979 or not. But I did feel like, oh yeah, that kind of looks like that guy's trying to do the Sheik. And then it said it was Chavo Jr., I believe, right? Or was it Chavo Jr. or Chavo Sr.? But in any event, good job. I think it was Chavo Jr. Looked a lot different, but I thought he did well. He was also the wrestling choreographer, it said. Like I said, MJF is the executive producer. Tip of the fucking hat, MJF. So, what do I think? Ultimately, I feel like we could have had Chris in this thing. I have spoken on this on the And Action Film Podcast. I'm the co-host on. We do know in my personal circles a film screenplay that was written about a real-life guy. He had like 6 sisters. The screenwriter was like, hey man, can we abridge these 6 sisters to like 1? Because I could make a really strong supporting, this is just another story, but can I make these 6 sister characters 1? And the subject matter insisted on all 6 sisters, and the script became a fucking mess because of it. So I do understand the whole reason of eliminating another character of Chris, but as a wrestling fan, I kind of feel like that's how Chris's life was at. He was always being eliminated. He was always being forgotten. And now even in this movie, he's forgotten. So I feel like that's kind of the minor tragedy, or the tragedy of this movie is the real life Chris Von Erich felt ignored, overlooked, unimportant, and guess what? That's what this film tells us, that Chris was not really there. So I feel kind of shitty about it. Like I said, if you really want to get artsy-fartsy A24 films, BBC films, then you could have called the character Michael Chris Von Erich. You could have had a few elements of Chris's life thrown in the mix. Because Mike and Chris were very similar in the fact that they were both younger, both smaller, both stepping in these very heavy footsteps of their older brothers and father. So I think they could have done that artistically, and maybe assholes, but some other asshole would give you a fucking Joey's instant movie review where he said, why the fuck did they merge Mike and Chris Von Erich? So goddamn stupid. So anyway, folks, wrapping this goddamn thing up, I'm going to give this probably 4.5 out of 5, 4.25 out of 5 stars. If you're a wrestling fan, go see it. If you're not a wrestling fan, go see it. Somebody said it's the feel-bad movie of the season. I don't know about that. I feel pretty good about it. I'm just, as a longtime wrestling fan, we've been waiting for this one, and we got it. We always wanted a goddamn Von Erich movie. Now we got the Iron Claw. So I say they took a tough subject matter and did the very best they could. MikeMessier.com. Buy my books, Fight or Play Basketball, Distance from Avalon, One Man and a Camera Films to see my movie. Next time, cast me in the movie, okay?